Hello everyone, my name is Ki, and welcome to the very first episode of Metamorphoses, a podcast where I will retell the stories in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Now, this first episode is titled Prologue and Prologue. This means that this is both a prologue, an introduction to the podcast, and also an explanation about what I would like to do, and a glance at the very first part of the Metamorphoses, the prologue. The first thing I should say is that I am not a native English speaker, as you can probably hear. Because of this, I sometimes pronounce Greek and Roman names slightly different than you might be used to hearing. Unless I have often heard a certain name in the English pronunciation, like Ovid or Homer or even Hercules, I will most likely pronounce them the way I learned to pronounce them. For example, I am more comfortable pronouncing Oedipus as Oedipus. I think the latter is actually more accurate to the original Greek or Roman way of saying it anyway. Well then, with that little disclaimer out of the way, I would like to quickly give you my own background, so you can see where my interest in the Metamorphoses came from, and in what way I might understand or analyse Ovid's stories. I, like quite a lot of others before me, became obsessed with Greek mythology by reading the Percy Jackson series. Cliché, I know. By that time I was already studying Latin and Greek in high school, so really that was just a bonus on top of my obsession, and new incentive for me to pay attention in class, though mythology was sadly a topic which did not come up very often. In university I studied history, with a focus on classical history, as you can guess, for which I have my bachelor's, and now I am in the process of getting my master's. I have had a couple of courses with a focus on mythology or on the Metamorphoses itself. Because of all this, I thought it was a great idea to start this podcast, both for myself and also, of course, for others who are interested. I plan to tell and analyse each little story in the Metamorphoses, starting from book 1 and going all the way to book 15. There are a lot of stories in Ovid's work, but still, this means that this podcast has an expiration date. But we'll see about that when we get there. There's still a long way to go. I primarily use two translations of Ovid's Metamorphoses, one in English by David Rayburn and one in Dutch by M. Dane Scheltema. This way I can compare the two for different ways of translating the original Latin. And then lastly, before I start with the actual prologue to book 1, I want to quickly sketch Ovid's background and when this work was written. Ovid lived mostly during the time when Augustus was emperor, so that means the last part of the 1st century BC, first part of the 1st century AD. He wrote a lot of works, like Ars Amatoria, about love, the Fasti, a poetic calendar about the Roman year, which Ovid stopped writing after the first 6 months for some reason, though the Metamorphoses is probably his most popular and most well-known work. Later in Ovid's life, he was banished from Rome for mysterious reasons. Theories for the reasons for his banishment go from juicy gossip to conspiracy theories. Ovid might have had relations, wink wink, with the emperor's daughter. Or the banishment was one large publicity stunt. Anyway, the banishment actually has no repercussions for this podcast, because the Metamorphoses was written, though not yet completely finished, before Ovid was banished. And even though he tried to burn his unfinished work, there were already too many copies going around. Interesting to think one of the most influential works throughout European history is one the author did not want us to read. The Metamorphoses starts with a prologue. It's quite short, only 4 lines. Ovid starts his work by explaining what he is about to do. This work will be about changes, about shapes and forms changing. This is, after all, what the title of the work also tells us. Metamorphoses is a word that is actually Greek, not Latin. It means to change form. The Latin translation would be transformatio, transformation. Next, Ovid implores the gods to help and inspire him during the writing of his work. This is a traditional way of opening a work in the classical world. Writers would ask the gods, or more often the muses, the goddesses of several art forms, to inspire them. The implication was that the muses would be the ones to actually invent the stories and give them via divine inspiration to the writer. Of course, this became more or less a formality, and credit almost always went to the earthly authors. This line is also one where my two translations seem to diverge from one another. One says that the gods have transformed Ovid's art, implying that the gods have helped Ovid in writing a new form of poetry. The other says that the gods took part in the transformations, which I would interpret as the gods themselves are characters in these stories, and they are the ones who sometimes transform the people/nymphs/birds and whatnot. The last part of this very short prologue gives us a timeline for Ovid's work, a very clear and concise one, from the beginning of the world to his own time. Well, you got to have ambitions, I guess. This is going to be one very, very long poem. This was the first episode of Metamorphoses, prologue and prologue. I hope you enjoyed it. At the moment, the plan is to release new episodes every 2 weeks on Saturday. We'll see how things go. I am having a lot of fun doing this, and I hope I can spread the fun to other people. Till next time, everyone.